It's the September 2023. It's the September HPCC community meeting, and on the agenda for this evening, we'll get an update from. We'll have some announcements. We'll give an update from Zone 5, and we have Pittsburgh Regional Transit here rather to talk about the upcoming bus route changes, and we have the Pittsburgh Food Policy Council to talk about the Food Justice Fund, and then we'll wrap. So I'm Sabrina Solba. I'm the vice president of HPCC, and I am the acting meeting leader while Stephanie Walsh, HPCC president, is on sabbatical for the next couple months. We at HPCC, if this is your first meeting, we are a community organization, the registered community organization for Highland Park, and our mission is to help support community members and connection with the city, with neighborhood issues, and we run a lot of community events. So I'll start off our announcements by just celebrating that we had a very successful Reservoir of Jazz this past month, and I know a number of volunteers, possibly I see some people in the room who volunteered with that. That is a great event for the community. It's a great event for us as an organization. We won the 50-50 raffle in conjunction with that. So thank you to our volunteers, and I hope some of you had a chance to enjoy that music. We will have a number of events this fall coming up. There is going to be a parklet cleanup on October 14th. We'll be just doing a little bit of cleanup on the parklet on Bryant Street, which is maintained by the Highland Park Community Council and generous time and money donations by volunteers and businesses on the street. And the day after October 15th, there will be a pumpkin patch for kiddos. So if you would like to come out and get a pumpkin with your family or stop by, there'll be some fun family events there. And then on October 28th, there will be a children's Halloween parade as well. So those are the next upcoming events for the next month. Also, we are sending out our print newsletter, which in the past usually goes out in May. This year it's going out in the fall. So you will be receiving that probably by the second week of October. It will go to everyone in the neighborhood. And so in there'll be a calendar of events as well as other articles and information for the community. A couple other announcements I wanted to make. The Pittsburgh Bureau of Police has provided us with a live calendar for the firing range schedule for residents who live in the neighborhood. You know that we can hear the gunfire from the firing range, and that has been an ongoing issue and discussion for the neighborhood. And everyone always wants to know what's the schedule, when should we expect to hear it. We do have a live calendar now that was sent out to the listserv, and after we turn over the announcements, I'll drop it in the chat here as well. So if you want, you can use that link to see the schedule. It goes all the way through December already, and we've been told it will be kept up to date. And I think with that, I think we're ready for the Zone 5 update. And do we have Jeff Crawford?
Yeah. Hold on. Hi.
Hi.
Lieutenant Cunningham. So down in Zone 5, I'm currently the PM lieutenant. Right now, we don't have much in the way of an update. I was looking through the different reports and whatnot, and over the last month through the Highland Park community, looks like we've only had about 4 Part 1 crimes, 2 being theft from vehicle and one criminal trespass and 1 burglary it went through. So just some basic safety tips and things that we're looking for in the upcoming area, of just to advise everybody to make sure you go ahead and lock the cars at night. A lot of the crimes that we're seeing are crimes of opportunity, of unlocked cars and valuables left in plain sight that someone can come through and grab. So just reiterating that of, at the end of the night, take everything inside and make sure everything's locked up.
From commanders.
Oh, yes. Also, we're in the middle of transitioning. Commander Vanansky has moved over to Zone 4, and Commander Larry Mercurio will be taking over and he's starting his transition in, and will be attending the future meetings.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions that they want to raise? I don't see
Yeah.
any.
Sabrina, do you have contact information for Commander Venario?
I do have their email, yes.
Thank you.
Okay,
Well, it was nice seeing everybody tonight.
thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Okay. And now we'll move on to the PRT presentation. And we have with us this evening, Missy Rubin, who's the Internal Communication Manager at PRT, and Philip St. Pierre, who's the Director of Service Planning and Scheduling. And before we get started, I just want to say, the focus of this meeting is about the bus route changes and access questions that will be occurring starting at the beginning of October 1st. I also want to just acknowledge that there is an ongoing conversation about the layover location on St. Clair across from the Flynn Parklet, and a desire and an agreement with the community that that would get moved. And that has been delayed because of the pandemic and the Rising Main project and a number of other things. So there's an ongoing conversation about that. And we will be having, I believe, Amy Silverman from PRT come back to the community to have a meeting specifically about that, and have a community engagement specifically on that issue. But for this evening, we're going to focus, at least initially, just on the bus changes and the access questions, because those will be happening very soon. So if you have questions about other issues that are maybe longer term, we can at least save them to the end, and then we can collate those and maybe address some of them. And with that, I'll turn it over to Missy and Pierre.
Hi, thank you so much, Sabrina. Thank you all for having us here tonight. We are excited to share these changes with you. If you've not seen them in the newspaper or on buses or everywhere else that they've been posted, we are here to give you a presentation. I know that some of you may have joined us for our public presentation that we did last Wednesday. But we're happy to provide it here again, and we hope that we're able to address very specific questions that you may have, specific to your route. Philip St. Pierre is the Director of Scheduling. He is the czar of all things schedule, and he can answer any and all of those questions that you may have. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Philip.
All right, thank you, Missy. Good evening, everyone. As Missy said, I'm Philip St. Pierre. I'm the Director of Transit Scheduling at PRT. I do just want to get some confirmation that my screen share is working. If somebody could just give a thumbs up if they were.
Looks good.
All right, thank you. All right. So tonight I'm going to give a brief presentation on the BRT program for the University Line, which is being branded as PRTX, and that's going to be the bus rapid transit project through the downtown, uptown Oakland areas. All right, to give a brief history of this project, of the University Line, the planning and design history, back in 2017, there was an original plan that was taken out to the public, and what was called the original selection of the locally preferred alternative. And I wasn't at PRT at this time, but I believe there was 3 routes originally slated to become bus rapid transit routes. There was some workshops in the summer that were kind of more focused on station locations. And in the fall, there were some additional community meetings, and particularly in the Mon Valley, where they stressed that there was a desire for the continued direct connections to downtown. So back in 2018, PRT revisited, Port Authority at the time revisited the locally preferred alternative and conducted some public meetings, and came to a concurrence that that the plan was changed to what we call the frequency preservation plan, which includes 5 routes that would become bus rapid transit. And that would be the 61A, the 61B, 61C, 71B, and the P3. So after getting concurrence on that, they took that plan to 60% design in the year 2020, and continued with public open house meetings, and eventually got it to a 90% design in January of 2021. and continued those public meetings. And then in 2022, there was a scope update at these meetings during the summer that continued discussions about the BRT project and making updates to the designs. And then in 2022 and 2023 in the winter, there was public information sessions held with additional comment periods and official public hearings for these proposed service changes. And that was in between November 2022 and 2023, January of 2023. So let's talk about some of the scope revisions that occurred during the summer of 2022. And the main scope revision for the BRT project that was changed from the previously original and designs was that the branches were going to be moved out of the initial bus rapid transit project and tried to be funded at a later date with a different grant opportunities. So the branches, which is the Squirrel Hill branch and the Highland Park branch stations, those projects have been deferred to a later date, but the BRT service proposal that includes the way the routes are going to run and they're going to operate in their frequency proposal, nothing of that has changed. And the focus of the initial infrastructure changes is going to be in the downtown and the uptown and Oakland areas. And the construction has actually started, and it began recently in downtown. And we will eventually, once downtown is complete, we'll be moving into the uptown area. Also, that was another project that was separated was the electrification of the fleet. We are still getting electric buses for the BRT project, but they're not being rolled into the BRT grant. There's also another project that's going on that's going to be part of the BRT project, but not part of the BRT funding, is the Smart Signals project that will begin after all the construction activities have for the actual infrastructure for the bus rapid transit has completed. So we do have some major service changes that are occurring in about 10 or 11 days. The major service changes so the routes that are not becoming BRT that are part of the 61 and 71 series, those routes are being short-turned in the Oakland area. That is the 61D, the 71A, 71C, and the 71D. They will terminate in Oakland and will not service uptown and downtown Pittsburgh. These routes will turn around at the turnaround opportunity at 5th Avenue and Robinson Street. The 61 series buses will do that U-turn at Robinson, but make a right turn on Craft and make a left turn on Forbes and continue on Forbes for their outbound trips. The 71 series buses will continue to do that U-turn in Oakland at the Robinson turnaround, but will stay on 5th at this time and continue to use those the contraflow lanes as they are still available today. These routes will have short added to their route names and their head signs, and for public awareness of the routes. We do want to note that the P3 had 2 major service changes proposed in the winter of 22 and 23, but due to the public comment that we received for those plans, we decided that we needed to continue to reevaluate some more alternatives, and we have deferred a decision on that until the winter of 2024. We have heard the question about why we're doing this now. Obviously, the full implementation of BRT after all the construction is still a few years away. But right now, one of our main challenges is making sure that these routes, that the ones that are going to be short-term, do not get impacted by all the construction that's going to be incurring in the downtown and the uptown areas and the Oakland areas. So we are setting the beginning stages. Now, this was still part of the BRT plan, that these routes would be short-turned in the future, and now that future is here with the October 1 service changes to make sure that we can try to keep those routes as reliable as possible. PRT also is continuing to experience a shortage of bus operators. This has been affecting our ability to cover 100% of the scheduled service. So this does give us the ability to reduce some of the hours and try to meet our schedule obligations. But with the reductions of the short-term routes, we were also able to dedicate some hours to other routes, like the 82, the 87, the P1, and the P7. So talk about some of the mitigations to support these service changes, to support for direct downtown service connections. Routes 82, 87, and P7 had added trips for October. We improved frequencies at certain times of days on the 61 and 71 series routes to align all schedules in the core areas of Oakland, and reduce out of service trips system-wide. That is a goal, the goal with our next service change. And added trips to routes that had reductions in 2022 due to workforce shortages. Priority is based on ridership and equity, and the first one up is the P1 East Busway, which will be seeing a frequency increase from 12 minutes to 8 minutes in the peaks for that October service change. Here's a chart here that shows our frequencies by time of day. There is a minor frequency reduction on the 71 series that you can see in yellow there on the 20, where it says 20. Currently, it operates every 18 minutes, so it does see a minor reduction in frequency from 18 to 20 minutes. But we were able to improve frequencies on the 61 series buses, which will be the longer buses just after the PM peak, as gets into the evening service there, going to every 20 minutes. The 71 series will see a frequency improvement on Saturdays, and the 61 series and some of the 71 series buses will see frequency improvements on Sunday. This chart here talks about when we have all these routes working in conjunction with each other, what the average frequency is through the corridors. As you can see here, Forbes Avenue to Squirrel Hill on the 61 series buses at the peaks will average about every 4 minutes going through that corridor. Fifth Avenue to Shadyside on the 71 pairing of the B and D, approximately about every 8 minutes at the morning and afternoon peaks. Middays about every 10 minutes. Center Avenue to Shadyside in Bloomfield on the 71 A and C, it's very similar to the 71 B and D. Uptown and downtown on the 71 B, 61 A, B, and C, which are all the BRT routes, averaging close to every 4 minutes at the morning and afternoon peaks for weekday service. So some frequency improvements and some frequency reductions at some times of the day. And we'll talk about some of the schedule and next steps. In August of 2023, which was last month, the construction begins in the downtown area. On October 1, these major service changes will go into effect on the 61D, 71A, 71C, and 71D. In winter of 2024, we plan to come out to the public for updates on the planned P3 routing changes. In early 2025, construction ends in downtown and begins in uptown and Oakland. And that concludes the presentation that I have for today, and I am available for any questions that you may have this evening.
Thank you, Philip. I wondered, Howard, if we can unpin, and that way, if anyone wants to raise their hands to ask a question, we can see them. And of course, anyone is able to type into the chat if you have a question, you want to submit it that way. And then we do have 3 questions that were pre-submitted that we can go to if there's no immediate questions from the audience. Okay, why don't we start with the questions that were submitted from the form? Oh, I see a question come in from Mac. Once up and running with BRT buses running, will BRT buses come out to Highland Park and lay over here?
Yes, the plan for the layover is to eventually move over to Mellon Terrace. The 71A and the 71B are planned to move over there at the completion of the implementation of the BRT. That timeline, the timeline for that movement over has not been determined yet until we get the accommodations there at Mellon Terrace. At this time, that portion is unfunded of the project, but if that advances at a given time, we can reevaluate at when to move those routes over. It doesn't necessarily have to be dependent on the total completion of BRT. But at this time, there's no timeline that I can give for today of when that would be available.
We have a question from Marilyn from Senator Williams' office. Is the PRT information presented tonight included on the PRT website?
I believe so. Missy, do we have I believe we have the presentation from the 12th maybe up.
Yeah, I believe the presentation is loaded on the website. I will check tomorrow morning if it is not, and we will post it. But I think that it may already be there.
For a quick reference, for all things BRT related, if you go to rideprt.org/BRT, that's the quick link to all things BRT related. And maybe if somebody can put that in the chat for me. Thank you very much. So we try to keep that updated as often as possible, and when changes are made. And I believe we have a email group as well. So if you need to stay in the know on things related to BRT, we can get you some information on that as well.
Yeah, if you can drop that as well into the chat, that way if anyone's interested in being on that announcement list, that would be helpful. I'll bring up one of the questions that was pre-submitted. My family's main transport bus is the 71A. Will it have the same route both in and out of Oakland to and from Highland Park? Will the new BRT bus also be traveling from Oakland to Highland Park along Negley?
So as of right now, the 71A service in Highland Park is not changing. So it will still continue to have the route through Highland Park that it has today. In the future, when the branch, what we're calling the branches, when that is funded and moved over to Mellon Terrace, that route will eventually move to Negley. And so if you go to rideprt.org/BRT, there's a map there, 2 maps there that will show what the final BRT will look like and what the individual routes will do. But as of right now, for that specific question, the 71A will stay as it is today in Highland Park, but in the future, it will move to Negley as it traverses to Mellon Terrace.
And I understand the route is shortened, but for the part of the route that's the same, like going into Oakland, it's along the same streets and stops that it has been?
Correct.
Okay. Another question is, will the Airport 28X be affected?
As of right now, the 28X will not be impacted. On the webpage, we do have some potential future plans that we'll evaluate further. And what it states on the website, there's no changes currently proposed, but future plans could include shifting the route from Boulevard to the Allies to 5th and Forbes Avenue. So that may be an additional change that, after we see how the BRT is running, see, what kind of capacities we can accommodate through those corridors. The 28X may see some minor changes. Now I would say that's probably in the more distant future, maybe in a few years.
Okay, and then the last
pre-submitted question was, could more buses be added to areas just outside of Pittsburgh? Since the downtown area is slowly becoming, and I'm reading the person's question, since the downtown area is slowly becoming more decrepit and unsafe, cultural activities that would normally be downtown are happening in outlying districts such as Oakmont, which has only one PRT bus service, etc.
Yes, understand the question. As of right now, we are having some challenges on our manpower, particularly on our operator force. So right now, the challenge is our inability to expand services at the moment. One of the things that, obviously we're doing a lot behind the scenes to tackle that challenge. But I would also like to note that we are going through a network redesign study where we're going to be doing a lot of public outreach and a lot of feedback. And we're in the very, very early stages of that project. But that's going to be, some great feedback that we're looking at is that, the dynamics of downtown have changed, and the dynamics of origin and destinations for the daily commuter is not necessarily every day. It's, some folks are working from home. So there's definitely some opportunities in the future where we may be able to provide more coverage into areas that don't have coverage today. And that's the type of feedback that we're going to be seeking, like where should we provide service, and where is that service needed, so that we can get all that information in that study, for us to better evaluate, what does the network of our future look like, in years to come. So just wanted to pitch that network redesign study. We're in the beginning stages of it, and we definitely look forward to coming out and seeking feedback from the community on that.
Yeah, can you speak briefly about how that feedback will be collected? Obviously, we would welcome you back to this community meeting, but what are the other main channels you'll be outreaching that people could look for to provide their feedback?
I wish I had more details to give you tonight, but I know that, yeah, if Missy, if you got something lined up.
I was just going to say, I spoke with Amy earlier today, and those meetings are going to be public meetings that will be kicked off in November. As always, those presentations will be posted on the website, and there will be other ways that you can provide feedback if you're unable to attend the meeting. I'm sure we will be taking feedback through the website as well. You can always call customer service and provide them feedback as well. Not yet, but once the process starts. She did mention that the very beginning of that process will be really, really high level, and we won't get into like the nitty-gritty street level detail until probably the third one. So they're planning a series of 3 meetings beginning in November.
Okay. And are those meetings only in person, or are they also online?
I'm not sure yet, but what we have been doing is we've been doing either online or a combination.
Okay.
I would guess that the last Next Transit meetings, the last round that they completed, I believe they were online on Microsoft Teams, which you can join on your device using video, but you can also call in and just use the audio like on your phone if you choose to do that.
Okay. And we'll try to make sure that we pass that along to the community as well, when that time comes. So that's coming up actually pretty soon. We have another question from Mac. Starting in 2025, or when Oakland to downtown BRT is open, will all 71B buses be the articulated 60-foot buses, or will it only be during peak times like it is now?
So actually, with the October service change, all the 5 routes that I mentioned that are going to be continuing the long route going into downtown and Oakland, downtown, uptown, and Oakland, those routes will all trips on those will be assigned 60-foot articulated buses. Later this year, we anticipate getting the first actual true BRT bus, and they're going to be slowly kind of trickling in early in 2024. That's the most recent timeline that I've received. As those buses are brought onto property and they're branded with BRT or BRT PRTX branding, they will be assigned to those trips. But starting in October, because those are 60-foot buses for all those trips, for all the BRT trips, we've assigned all 60-foot buses to every trip on those routes. So as those new buses come in, they'll just roll right into those routes and be assigned the 60-footers. So starting in October 1, every trip on those routes that are slated to become BRT, they will be 60-foot buses. So we don't have to wait until 2025 for that.
Okay, any other questions from anyone about the route changes or future plans for service access Highland Park or the rest of Pittsburgh for buses? Okay. Seeing none, thank you both very much for for coming and joining us this evening, for answering questions, and for providing so many different ways to contact you and to provide feedback. We appreciate it. And with that, I think we will move on to the next part of the meeting.
Thank you very much for this
Thank you for having
opportunity.
us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Thank you for having us. I was just going to give one last plug that the BRT newsletter is great. If you're willing to sign up for it, we'd love to share it with you. You'll go to the News Hub. I put that link in there and that'll take you directly to it. And you can always email questions or concerns related to the project or changes. If after this meeting we leave tonight and you think of, a question that you have regarding the October 1st service changes, just shoot us an email. And we have several people monitoring that. We respond to them daily and quickly, and we're happy to help.
Okay, thank you. All right. The second presenter for this evening is Jody McLaughlin from who's the Food Justice Fund liaison from Pittsburgh Food Policy Council. And we can get them pinned, Howard. Hi. All right, and I'll just let you take it away. Oh, can you try presenting? Let's make sure that that works.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm picking a screen. I may need to move some things around. Oh, give me 1 second. It's asking for so many things. Let's see. Let's try this again. Can you see my computer? Awesome. So before I jump into the slide deck, I feel like I would be doing a great disservice to my involvement with the Pittsburgh Food Policy Council if I didn't give a quick pitch for the Pittsburgh Urban Farm Tour, which begins, it actually takes place this coming Saturday. If you've not taken part in the Pittsburgh Urban Farm Tour, I highly recommend it. This is our 8th year. I've had the privilege of being an organizer this year. We've got 15 sites, including an apiary that's going to have honey tastings, an incredible hobby garden not too far from Highland Park, as well as a mushroom, like an indoor mushroom garden, which I think is fascinating. So I will post in the comments the link to this Eventbrite registration if you have any interest in attending this. But with that, I'm gonna hop over and see if I can do this. I may need to switch my views. Hold on one moment. All right. Can you guys see the full screen mode? Your silence tells me. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Awesome. I live in 2 screens because I do a lot of data analytics. I'm a public health. I'm working on my master's in public health presently. And so I've adopted the 2-screen method so I can work with as many Excel spreadsheets as possible. So hi, everybody. My name is Jody McLaughlin. I am finishing my master's in public health with Tulane University. And a part of my graduation requirements is doing an internship. So I've been interning with the Pittsburgh Food Policy Council since January of this year. But prior to that, I was already a member of the Pittsburgh's Food Justice Fund Committee. We're a coalition of folks who worked with Councilwoman Deb Gross and other city elected officials to work toward the creation of a food justice fund, which is a $3 million grant program that City Council approved in July of this year. And I'm coming to you to talk about it and also to ask for a little bit of help from you. So just so you know, the goal of the Food Justice Fund is to increase investments at that grassroots level, working to address food apartheid in the city of Pittsburgh. I am myself not a Pittsburgher by birth. I am originally from Texas, and so I've only lived in the city for the past decade. But it was something I quickly learned about regarding like the long history of systemic racism that has been projected on communities of color. And one of the things that has resulted in that systemic racism is something that we call food apartheid, which is a deliberate, purposeful process of working toward disinvestment in communities to where they are at a place where they lack the proper food systems that they need to survive in a healthful manner. So the goal of the fund is to work against the history and try to correct what has happened in the past, but doing it through like a community-led focus. So having the communities tell us what it is that they need in order to make things better. So why food justice? For those who aren't in the know, food insecurity is an outcome of poverty. And many of the communities in Pittsburgh that have a history of poverty it's a generational history of poverty. It's not just one, it's not just current, it's been going on for a long time. And one of those outcomes is food insecurity. They have to make decisions regarding paying rent or paying a mortgage, being able to pay for transportation to get to work. And sometimes the first thing that's sacrificed is what they buy and what they eat. And they tend to, lean toward processed foods because they're cheaper, which has pretty terrible outcomes regarding their long-term health. And as well, as I mentioned, many of the impoverished communities in Pittsburgh were deliberately disinvested from, starting back in the 1930s with a federal program focusing on home ownership and lending, which led to several decades of what we know as redlining today, where communities were basically ignored or companies pulled out of those neighborhoods. And over time, the economic stability of those communities declined rapidly and continue to be in an impoverished state. So the Food Justice Fund, pardon me, I have 3 boys at home and they're all very loud. You can't hear them. The Food Justice Fund was a 2-year-long campaign working toward what we first initially asked for was $10 million that the city to establish a fund to support making a more equitable food system. In the end, we were grateful the city created a fund establishing a $3 million grant program. And what we're looking at now as of July of this year is a grant program that is focused on either nonprofits or fiscally sponsored entities such as a citizens group, neighborhood group, community organizations, or other entities that are maybe not in Pittsburgh proper, but most of the work that they do is focused on Pittsburgh and focusing on ways that they can work on improving very hyper local food systems. We're giving priority to projects that look specifically for transformational change. So this isn't necessarily about charitable food distribution. We're looking at specifically at those neighborhoods that are food insecure. And, there are some neighborhoods like Homewood, Hazelwood, Lincoln, Leamington, and Belmar that have very long histories of poverty. But we also acknowledge that there are neighborhoods that have pocket poverty or pocket food insecurity. You know, Garfield itself has gone through a lot of change in the last few years, and while Garfield now has a grocery store, that doesn't necessarily mean that people who live on top of the hill in Garfield have, you know, the same kind of food access as other people do. So we're trying to be very focused on like what food insecurity looks like. This program is definitely focused on making sure that organizations that are either led by or are working toward equity for Black, Indigenous, and peoples of color, women, and also LGBTQ plus individuals, anyone that is considered marginalized, making sure that they are given opportunities to try to work on food access issues for their specific community. And then also has a history of demonstrating relevant work. So have you already been working in this area, and an additional grant would help, you know, catapult the work that you've been doing into something that is much more transformational, really lending toward change, be that from a community efficacy perspective, like the creating like a feeling of safety in the community, or also from an economic development perspective, creating jobs. And then there's also just the educational component, providing education about nutrition and food that could potentially help these neighborhoods have more improved long-term health outcomes. And then, of course, we're always looking for collaboration. When we first started talking about the Food Justice Fund with City Council and with the Mayor's Office and other city, you know, staffers and officials, we got a lot of questions regarding like, what is a Food Justice Fund? What does it mean? And many of them were really surprised to learn that this isn't something that we just like grabbed out of the air. Food justice has been around for a really long time. And Pittsburgh has become the 8th city in the United States that has adopted a food justice fund-like program. Other places include Philadelphia, Chicago, Seattle, Sacramento, and Washington, D.C., and Boston. And the whole focus of these programs is looking specifically on how to improve these long-term health outcomes through food justice, which is making sure that the food system itself is more equitable. And so with that said, you know, one of the things that we've struggled with in talking to the community, as well as like city, state, and federal officials, is that we're very hesitant to define the types of projects that will be supported when the grant program launches in the next couple of months, because ultimately it's up to the community or the neighborhood that has this need to define what the need is and to define the way to get to the outcome that they desire. So we did come up with some like suggestions or some ideas to kind of help people maybe kind of grasp this more like vague concept or like theoretical concept of food justice by talking specifically about improving food access, programs that can be used to improve the environment, ways to improve the community. I mentioned earlier, like the term collective or community efficacy. It's a public health term, but it's about, you know, that community itself having like the strength and the belief that it can do things to improve itself over time. Studies have shown that communities that have been downtrodden, especially for long periods of time, don't really necessarily believe that they're capable of improving, and it has like long-term psychological detriments toward them. So the idea of like, what methods can you take to improve a community? And then of course there's the public health aspect, which is looking at introducing cooking classes or ready-made foods to go, because time is always an issue when people live in poverty. You know, they have to pick between, do I prepare the meal and not have time to sit down with my child because I have to go to that second job, or do we get fast food and have time together? And so creating, like removing that barrier for them when time is the issue. Which ultimately allows them to eat healthier foods together, and long-term can maybe reduce the inclinations of heart disease happening or diabetes. So these are just some suggestions of programs that can be supported. As I said, it's very much up to the community. So, we originally asked for $10 million. We're grateful that the city allocated $3 million. We're currently looking at ways of getting additional funding so we can have more money to spend on food justice. And presently there are 2 tiers of grant funding that are going to be available. The first tier is a pool of $1.5 million, focusing on this kind of grassroots community efforts for grants between $2,000 and $75,000. Those grants are going to be distributed by a third party, some sort of a foundation or some sort of a funding arm like the United Way, that has the ability to distribute these funds. And the idea is that those are like very hyper-local grassroots programs. They're focused specifically on nonprofit organizations or fiscally sponsored organizations that have an operating budget of under $500,000. And then the second tier, so I'm not just talking with all of you guys, I'll put this up on the screen. The second tier is $1.1 million to be awarded to what we define as capital projects. These are much larger projects, really focused on making big transformational impact. The grant ranges will be between $75,000 and $500,000, and they'll be managed through the city. People are often like, what does that mean? So, and again, I'm not a native Pittsburgher, so I've had a lot to learn about like what food insecurity looks like in Pittsburgh. There are communities today that still don't have grocery stores. There's one in particular that hasn't had a grocery store since 1985. And so they have real needs about improving their food access, be that through corner stores or small bodegas or improving transportation. And so we see these grants as ways to kind of help like lessen the issue or like remove the issue altogether, be that through a food hub or a grocery store or whatever the community again decides. So there's an application process because it is a grant program. We're currently working on an RFP to identify that third-party entity to manage the grant program for the Tier 1 grants. We're putting together a governing board I apologize, I'm kind of skipping ahead. There's a grant application process, and knowing that a lot of small communities struggle with grant applications or maybe don't necessarily have the access or the experience for grants. Writing a grant application, we intend to provide technical support for those organizations so the actual process is easier. And of course, we are keeping in mind that we want the process to be as barrier-free as possible. So the idea is simplifying it. And then of course, we want to be able to provide informational sessions for these organizations so they know like clearly what they're going into when they make these applications, and then having a quick turnaround so they're not waiting on us. Evaluation is something that has come up quite a bit, especially because this is a city-funded program. And so it's really important that we have tools put in place so we can articulate the outcomes and like the positive change or even like the lessons learned when you do a program like this. So there'll be biannual reporting. And then if it's a one-year project, there's like a final grant report. If it's a multi-year project, reporting is done every 6 months based on the purpose of the fund. And then data will be collected to demonstrate the overall impact that we can share with the city, but then also the city itself can share about the good work that it's doing to try to help alleviate this big problem that we're dealing with. There's a governing board, and I wanted to mention this to your group just in case, there are any of you who have experience working in the food system or have work in like improving food access or have experience in like the food industry or food systems. Also, if you have experienced like food insecurity yourself and have like a real connection to this, in the next couple of weeks, the city will put a call out for a governing board. What's been proposed is a 9-person governing board, and the board is responsible for helping make decisions regarding who will receive these funds. Again, it's that like lived experience, or it's that professional experience that helps guide those decisions that are being made. And this slide just kind of shows some bullet points of what we've proposed that we would like, some skills that we would like these folks to have as these decisions are being made, because we anticipate people putting grants in to be able to buy property, or to start farms, or to create a food hub, or to provide education to youth or elders. So this is an opportunity that'll be upcoming. And then here's our timeline. You know, it's working with the city, so it's not always like clear cut. Things can take longer, things can go really fast. We're really lucky, you know, when they put the $3 million in the budget for this fiscal year, we had 6 months to come up with a plan, and we were actually able to put it together and get council buy-in and get council to pass it within about 3 months, which I hear is a miracle in city standards. So we're trying to work pretty aggressively on our timeline in order to make sure that this money gets to the right people as quickly as possible so change can be made. And so right now we are doing a multitude of things. We have a survey, which I'll talk more about in just a moment, with all of you, that we are trying to get as much input on regarding people's relationship to food, to help make better informed decisions when it comes to how this money is being allocated. In addition to that, we are working with Catherine Vargas. She's the director of City Parks. If you don't know her, you should. She's awesome. She's been helping us develop a job description for the Food Justice Fund coordinator, who is the person that's going to be responsible for helping make sure that this program runs on the train like it should. There's the RFP, or the request for proposal, that we're putting together for the third party. And then of course, we're working with her to work on this governance committee that we're trying to establish. If all goes to plan, we anticipate releasing the request for proposals for the Tier 1 grant program by either very late fall, early winter 24. And then we anticipate being able to start awarding grants once they're approved by council in spring 2024. So we're really hoping that in 9 months from now, all of you will be hearing more about the Food Justice Fund, but it's because money is going out to your community or communities in the surrounding area to help improve food access for those who really need it. I mentioned the Food Justice Fund survey. This is one of the quickest surveys I think I've ever actually seen completed by anyone. It's only 8 questions, and we're currently trying to get as much information as possible from people who live in the city of Pittsburgh regarding their relationship to food. You know, a lot of the times, I'm like a big public health nerd who hangs out in the world of food access and food policy. So we talk about the food system. Most folks who don't live in that world are like, I don't know what that is, and I'm not a part of it, but really and truly we all are, because we all eat. So as a person who buys food and a person who eats food, you are very much involved in the food system. And so this survey is for you. And so the idea with this survey is just to collect information about, you know, what your role is, and that includes being a home gardener. It means eating food. It means if you donate to, you know, charitable organizations like food pantries or the food bank in Pittsburgh, identifying what your involvement is, and then also learning more about like how you access food. You know, do you buy food at the grocery store? Are you taking advantage of like delivery services? And then how you pay for food. And one of the reasons why we're really interested in how people pay for food is because we're wondering how many people who are participating in the survey are having to do like supplemental programs in order to afford their food, but then also like looking at people who are growing their own food and then also bartering their own food. I run an urban farm, so you know, I grow my own food. I give food out to the food pantries in my community, so like that's a unique thing compared to maybe somebody else. And then of course, we want to know what your thoughts are about the Food Justice Fund and how you think it should be used. Because ultimately this data is going to be, you know, analyzed and then shared with the governance committee. And we're hoping that it's a strong enough sample that it can help make informed decisions by that group of people based on like the collective data that we've put together, plus their own experiences, both personally and professionally. So at the bottom of this page is a link to the Engage page where the survey lives. I've provided a copy of this presentation to Sabrina, but when I'm done blathering on, I'll paste this into the chat for you. And if you don't mind just taking 3 minutes to complete it, I'd really appreciate it. And in addition to that, if you wouldn't mind sharing it with your neighbors, your friends, your family who live in the Pittsburgh area, that would also be appreciated. And yeah, this is my contact information. It's pretty easy. You're welcome to reach out to me if you have any like really specific questions, maybe for an organization you're involved in, or if I don't answer the question today while we're here. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Jody. And that the survey link was sent out to the community. We can send it out as well as the copy of the presentation. But if anyone has any questions right now, please go ahead and raise your hand or enter into the chat. Oh, I see Nancy. Why don't you unmute?
Okay, 2 questions.
Sure.
One is I kind of got lost in how the foundation is going to be involved in this, and this governing body, which seemed to me very cumbersome. And historically, the city of Pittsburgh has not done well with administering programs. So I was just unclear. You mentioned the foundation, then you mentioned this very long list of who would be on this governing board and how they're going to interrelate and how these decisions will be made. And the second thing, can you just give me an example besides like maybe a community garden? What do you see as possible programs or uses of these grants? If it's something small like $1,500 or $2,000, just give me an example of like in your dreams, what do you see as how this money would best be used by these communities?
Sure. So with your first question, so I apologize. I've been living this life for about 2 years now. So this is like very like it's part of my brain, and I don't think too much about like slowing down to talk more about it. So as a member of the Food Justice Fund Committee, there are roughly 70 people who have been working on this committee for the past 2+ years, trying to make this fund become a reality. And because many of them, including myself, have a history of working with governments and how difficult it can be regarding the management of money, and then also like equity of distribution of funds, the committee itself felt very strongly that a third party should be responsible for the oversight of at least a portion of these funds. So the request for proposal that I mentioned that we're hoping to launch shortly is a call to either like a foundation or an organization that has experience with like diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then also working with grant programs and distributing and managing funds related to these programs, would be responsible for like the oversight of that pool of money. So that tier 1 funding, that $1.5 million, would be managed by a separate entity from the city. And they would allow that money to, so I mean, it's hard for me to like say specific organizations because I don't know who's going to respond to the RFP, but locally speaking, like Poise Foundation has experience with this. The United Way of Southwest Pennsylvania has experience with this, where they're awarded or allotted a pool of money, and it's their job, because they have this experience and expertise, that they, help people through the grant process and then help with the oversight of the awards and then the reporting pieces. And so that way the city is removed from the process in some ways. The governance committee is the group of people who would be working with the third party on deciding who receives the awards. So they take in the grant applications, they review them, they meet over a period of time, and then they make the call on which of the grant applications should be rewarded funds, which are then turned back over to the third party for distribution. Does that help? Okay. And then your last question, or your second question, just regarding ways that like things can be improved or with these grants. You know, I don't live in a food apartheid community, so it's very difficult for me to talk about that as a person who's not living that experience. However, keeping in mind that I am working with some folks that do live in these communities, some of the things that they have talked with us about are things like cold storage and dry storage. You'd be surprised how much a person's business or an organization's impact on a community can change when they have the ability, like they have freezer space or they have a refrigerator, or in some cases have a community kitchen where they can prepare meals for distribution to people or at a reduced cost. So a person isn't having to make the meal, they can get the healthy meal that they can then serve to their family and eat with their family. And so for some people, they just need $5,000. But for some people, they need more than that, which is why the range is from 2,000 to 75,000, because they might need a truck for distribution or for food delivery and things like that. Does that answer your question, Nancy? I hope it does.
Nancy, you're muted. There you go.
Thank you. Yes, got it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, looks like Howard has a question.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but now I'm more confused.
Okay.
Does the fund exist and it's about to start giving out grants, or is the fund still in the organizational phase?
Both. The answer to your question is both. So the city has set aside $3 million to create the fund. So the fund has been approved. The plan for the execution of the fund has been approved. And now we're in the process of putting kind of the steps in place, or kind of creating the organizational steps in order for the release of the funds. So they have to hire a staff person in order to work as the liaison. They have to, because we have this desire and we have this want and approval for a third party entity, we have to go through the RFP process for that. And then because I have working relationships with the other food justice funds that exist in the US. So we're not kind of like reinventing the wheel. We're working off of a lot of what they're learning to put the application and process and things like that. And so as soon as those steps are completed, that's when the RFP for the grant process will be opened. And we would like it to be open before the end of the year, but it's looking more like winter 2024. So the program exists, the money is there.
Okay.
We're just setting it up.
Okay, great. Because while you were talking, I was like Googling it, and there's a lot of web pages that are, I think, a little bit out of date.
Probably.
Prior to this. Yeah, that was so I thought that got a little confused.
No, I apologize. So the Food Policy Council, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is essentially the region's advocacy organization when it comes to the food system. And it's a fairly new organization. It's, a very small grassroots organization itself. And so sometimes it takes them a little bit of time to get things up to date, which is one of the reasons why I'm going around to community organizations and talking in real time with you about these things.
Judy,
Mm-hmm.
Judy, thank you very much for being here.
Yeah.
And I know we're at the 8 o'clock hour, and so we're going to wrap up. But if folks do have more questions they'd like to ask you or follow up, could you drop your contact info? We'll just have that in there, and then we can also send out. You're okay with sending out that presentation deck entirely? We can send a link to that as well.
That's
Well,
totally fine. And I'm learning
actually-
to spell my name.
Even better, this meeting was recorded, so your entire presentation will be live. Actually, if you'd like, we can snip that out of the video and make that a standalone video.
Totally up to you guys. I mean, I think it's fine. James Murray from Councilwoman Gross's office. Are you cool with all that?
Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, we're just really excited to see that this is finally getting off, getting out the door. We're hopeful that this inspires a lot more investments into the food system across the city. This was intended to be like kind of like a seed, and we're excited to see what else can grow from it. The councilwoman's done a lot of put forth a lot of policy related to food justice and food initiatives. So this is a big step forward, and we're really grateful for the Food Policy Council, Grow Pittsburgh, and all the other community partners who have worked on this. So congratulations to you, Jody, too. This is a big step.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. And thank you, James. Please thank the councilwoman for us.
Well, for sure.
Fantastic. Well, if anyone has questions, you can reach out to Jody, or ideas, obviously, on how we can take advantage of this fund for the good of Pittsburgh. Sounds like the table is open for ideas and conversations. And with that, I think we'll close the meeting. Thank you everyone for attending, and we'll see you all next month.